Hey, I'm trying to set these wastegates, at least according to the instructions, which are really hard to follow. Um, but anyway, the spring color 3 millimeters apparently is preload. So what I did, I let the rod loose. I basically took this knot off, closed the flap, held it with my finger closed, and then measured 3 millimeters from the end of the flapper arm to the nut. So like there was a space between those two of 3 millimeters. Then I basically closed the rod with the nut. I basically forced the rod to come out those 3 millimeters and keep pressure on this flapper so that it stays shut. So that is the 3 millimeter preload. Now, you told me to set these things at 18 psi cracking pressure, but I think we got the wrong springs for that, because the orange spring requires 26 psi to crack it. I've got this foot pump with the gauge there, and right now I can't move that flapper at all. That flapper is tight, so I'm applying pressure. There's 18 psi, right? 18 psi. This thing is dead tight. I cannot budge that. This flapper is closed. It hasn't moved at all. Now, I'm going a little more in pressure. Right now I got 25 psi, 25, 26, and the flapper is just starting to move. It's just starting to crack open. So, which is on par with these pressures here for that orange spring. So I think if we want these wastegates to open at 18 psi, then we need to put in the black springs, not the orange springs. It's impossible to make these springs compress at 18 psi because they're 26 psi springs. And this is we're talking about that 3 millimeter rod preload. So just to overcompensate that 3 millimeters, it takes 26 psi. To open the wastegates completely, it takes 30 psi. It just popped off. So that's the dilemma. I don't think we have the right springs in this thing. If you want the orange springs, that's fine, but they're going to crack open at 26 psi, not at 18 psi. If you want these to crack open at 18 psi, then we need to put in the black springs, because these springs are too tough. That's just not going to work. It's physically impossible.